The scent of damp stone and paper fills the room, thick and heavy as I settle into my chair. The faint sound of rainfall taps against the distant glass above me, echoing through the Bethnal archives. This is East London, and today, like most days, it's a slate-grey sort of morning. Fog has rolled in thick as cream, coiling through the streets and seeping into every crevice of the city. If you know where to look, you can practically feel the history lurking, thick as the mist, in this old place. Hello, Edward here, Global Affairs Officer, responsible for logging and categorizing the uncanny that isn't necessarily a direct threat to His Majesty's Britannia. Today I'll be answering a question some of you, our ever-curious subscribers, have been asking. A creature not exactly native to these English shores, but one whose name still carries weight and wonder. Our intern, who's been helping produce these episodes, mentioned a flood of comments about something called Siren Head. Now, Siren Head's a creature that's taken on a life of its own in recent years, but as it turns out, I did come across something in the archives that might just shed some light on this entity. I've learned Siren Head isn't quite a British phenomenon, not traditionally anyway. Its roots run deepest in North America, particularly in dense, wild regions where the land itself feels old, where nature grows unchecked. So, I took it upon myself to make a call during yesterday's lunch break to our liaison in Salem, Massachusetts. It's good to compare notes now and then, and if there's one place with peculiar findings to spare, it's Salem. With the help of some key details they shared and a late night spent with my wife's ancient tippy-tappy lap tap, as she calls it, I gathered quite the collection of notes. Here's what I found. The first documented sighting of something resembling Siren Head dates back to 1938 in the dense woods of British Columbia, Canada. Now picture this, a logging camp isolated by miles of forest, surrounded by ancient trees that seem to press in on all sides. The air here would have been thick with the scent of pine and sap, the kind of forest where it's always cool underfoot, and the only sounds are the steady chop of axes and the occasional whisper of wind. And yet, come nightfall, something else began to break the silence. The workers reported strange, dissonant sounds echoing through the trees. They described it as a siren, but twisted, distorted, as though whatever was making the noise was struggling to mimic something it didn't fully understand. At first, the men tried to brush it off, calling it a prank or an unusual animal call. But the nights wore on, and with them, so did the eerie siren sounds, rising and falling through the trees like something searching for attention. Then one evening, one of the loggers claimed he saw it. A figure at the edge of the camp, standing tall, taller than any human. Its head was topped with two rusted, old-fashioned sirens, the kind you'd see on war footage or hear during an air raid. The figure moved awkwardly, as though it was something that wasn't meant to be moving at all. With each step, the sirens let out a low, static-laden wail that seemed to shake the air itself. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it melted back into the trees, leaving behind only the sound of fading static. The scent of burning metal and the heavy quiet that follows an echo must have filled that camp. By the end of the month, the workers had abandoned it entirely, leaving the tools to rust and the fires to go cold. To this day, that forest remains untouched, avoided, as if people can sense there's something otherworldly about it. Now, 1938 might be the first recorded encounter, but strange siren sounds in remote areas pop up far earlier, particularly in places where the woods are deep and the towns are small. There's an old folktale from rural Russia about a creature called the Banshee of the Pines. Picture the smell of fresh snow, the cold bite of mountain air, and the tall, looming pines. The townspeople described a skeletal figure with a strange contraption on its head that would emit a mournful wail just before disaster struck. Whether war, famine, or death, the Banshee's call came as an omen. I've come across similar legends across Eastern Europe and the American Midwest, where folks would hear strange, hollow wails that signaled a coming storm or calamity. Siren Head, or something like it, has always lurked on the fringes of human settlement, a kind of ancient harbinger. And yet none of those old folk tales quite capture the same eerie, mechanical precision we see in the more recent sightings. There's one account from Devon, England, in the early 1960s. An unlikely place for such a figure, granted, but strange things can find their way here too. It was 1962, early morning, and a local shepherd named Albert Fisher was out on the moors, his flock grazing around him. Imagine the smell of damp earth and the mist rolling low over the heather. Suddenly, a strange sound split the quiet, a deep, mournful wail with a static undertone echoing across the empty moorlands. Albert couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling him toward it, that he had to see the source. And then, through the fog, he saw it. A skeletal figure, impossibly tall, with sirens where its head should have been, standing silent in the mist. Years later, when he described it to a paranormal investigator, Albert spoke of its movements as unnaturally smooth, stretching and bending reality itself. That was the only English sighting I've come across for Siren Head. Albert swore until his dying day that what he'd seen that morning wasn't a man and wasn't a ghost either. It was something entirely other. And more recently, in 2004, I logged an encounter myself near the Forest of Dean. The village on the edge of the forest had started reporting strange noises, siren sounds mixed with crackling voices, like distorted radio interference, echoing out of the woods. At first, the villagers dismissed it as pranksters with a loudspeaker, but as the nights dragged on, the sounds persisted, moving through the forest as though something was watching from the dark. Eventually, a couple from the village decided to investigate. They didn't get far before they saw it. A figure taller than any tree, its body skeletal and twisted, with sirens for a head. The air around it grew heavy, as though reality itself was bending in its presence. They said the sirens twisted with a creak, and they had the sense it was listening. I interviewed them shortly after. They could barely get the words out, still shaken even weeks later. The husband, a former police officer, said he felt as though the creature's very presence warped the world around it. So is Siren Head real? It depends on what you consider real. Over the years, as I've sifted through countless stories like these, I've come to believe that Siren Head, like many other entities, might be more than just a singular creature. Perhaps it's not even a creature at all, but rather something we've given shape to out of our own fear. Picture it as a boundary marker, a kind of spectral guardian. It doesn't hunt, not exactly, nor does it appear randomly. It seems to show up at times when reality feels thin, or when we're approaching limits we shouldn't test. Maybe it's there not to harm us, but to warn us, to remind us that there are some places we're better off leaving alone. Now, categorizing Siren Head is a bit tricky. Here in the archives, we use a less rigid system than our American counterparts. They like clear distinctions, such as entity type A or type B. But Siren Head defies easy classification, operating on the edge of our understanding. Personally, I'd place it under Class 7th, unclassified dangerous phenomenon. It's neither malevolent nor benign, but something closer to a force of nature, dangerous if provoked, but otherwise content to exist at the periphery. If you're looking for ways to protect yourself, here's what I'd advise. First, trust your instincts. People who encounter Siren Head often report a profound sense of dread, an instinct to get away. That's your mind's way of telling you something is very wrong. Don't ignore it. If you hear strange, distorted siren sounds in a remote place, leave immediately. Head toward populated areas, familiar sounds, or lighted paths. Siren Head seems to avoid human density. Second, never investigate alone. Curiosity killed the cat, and in this line of work, it could get you into serious trouble. Siren Head may not be aggressive, but being in its presence affects reality in ways we don't fully understand. Sometimes it's better to let strange sounds remain a mystery. Lastly, protect your mind. This isn't about carrying talismans or holy symbols, though I won't discourage it. Staying grounded, resisting the lure of curiosity, and keeping a clear head may be the best defenses you have. Siren Head seems to thrive on curiosity, on that urge to draw closer to the unknown. So next time you find yourself wandering the woods and you hear a sound, a warped, distorted siren echoing from a place no siren should be, don't follow it. Don't get curious. Siren Head, if he's there, may be the only warning you'll get that you're stepping where you're not meant to be. Stay safe out there, friends. The archives will always be here to share what we know, but remember, not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are simply meant to be survived.